The 5 NLP books that will lead anyone, you included, from the beginner level to the master level in communication skills. The first one is called The Gut Impact by J.D. Fuentes. It was a very detailed and highly practical overview of how NLP is used in language in general between two individuals, between a speaker and a listener. It can be applied both in a one-to-one situation and in a one-to large wide audience situation. It was a pretty big breakthrough for me back in the day because if I remember correctly, it was the best book I read for unifying together all those small NLP language patterns you see here and there and all those techniques like pacing and leading. I think it was the best book I read that made the best job at unifying all of that together into one complete system. One of the big principles of the book is that there is what the head understands, more specifically what the conscious mind understands, and what the gut feels related to what is being said. The gut being the emotions, the emotional limbic brain, which is the one making all the decisions. And then, if you have been studying sales, you know about that. Then our brain is just justifying with logic what our gut instincts have been pulling us toward. And the whole book, The Gut Impact, is about how do you actually use language to talk to that part of the people's brain, this emotional aspect of themselves. So it is a big treatise about how to communicate with emotions rather than facts and boring knowledge, which highly analytical men have trouble sometimes to just get out of being extremely specific about this and information 1, information 2, how it is linked with information 3. Maybe you can just incorporate more feelings into all of that, and that will make your presentation way more interesting no matter who you talk to. And certain words and topics of conversation are just more emotionally loaded than anything else. So when you know those few tweaks, those few hidden spots that you can use in your communication, anyone will just listen to you much better because you will talk to this emotional part of themselves. Here are some quotes taken from the book. When you say many things your listener can immediately verify as accurate according to his/her sensory perceptions and abstract beliefs, your listener's emotions become engaged and his or her imagination opens up. And describe over and over the states you want your listener to experience. Repetition solidifies and intensifies. Those are principles. When I just opened the book again to prepare this video, I realized how many of those principles back in that book I had forgotten about because they were unconscious in me at this point, but that really formed the foundation of how I started to communicate and how I developed my persuasion skills down the road. I just realized many of the things I was taking for granted about how to influence others actually either came from this book or at least were extremely well explained in that book. Maybe I got them from other sources, but everything is so clearly explained in this one that I think it is definitely one of the first ones I would advise for a beginner. Next, number 2, we have The User's Guide to Sleight of Mouth by Doug O'Brien. I would recommend more this one when you want to study sleight of mouth. I would recommend more this one than the original one from Robert Dilts, even if the one from Dilts is way more packed with much more information and other NLP processes, but that is also the downfall of this initial sleight of mouth book. It was so loaded, the Dilts one, with so many things, so many rhetoric, philosophy, scientific principles and other NLP principles that for somebody just arriving in the field, I think it is pretty overwhelming. If your sole intent is to figure out how to use those sleight of mouth patterns in a conversation, I would argue that the one from Dilts is like a bit too much. If you already have some experience with words, language, persuasion, sales, how to influence others, why not? Starting by the one from Robert Dilts. Otherwise, I would say the one from Doug O'Brien is made a better job at simplifying and just giving you the raw patterns one by one, and just so that you have the basic fundamentals of, okay, what is an intention pattern, what is a consequence pattern, and definitely what I would recommend is to read all of that one by one, the 14 patterns, to read them one by one, or even just one a day, one a week, and then noticing in your conversations around you, noticing whenever you pick that. You have read about the intention pattern, okay, going back in the past, what was the intention of people for saying this, for acting this way. People will just have those things popping out of their language at any moment of the day during a conversation. When you open your ears and listen for what people say around you, you will notice everyone is using sleight of mouth patterns once in a while. It is just that you may not be at the level yet where you do that consistently. And the best communicators ever, some people that you may love hearing from and some people you may hate hearing from, politicians sometimes, the best ones are masters at sleight of mouth, at language skills. So if you listen to an advanced communicator, you may even spot even more or even more frequently of those patterns. The way to practice, in my opinion, is to divide you trying things and you observing and listening for others doing it. So of course, if it is not an advanced NLP person, that person may not be super trained and not using too many patterns, but any human being who is communicating with language around you is using some of those patterns anyway. Specifically, if you want a slight hint that may really blow your mind, figure out in your direct entourage right now in your life, tell me, who is the most irritating, pessimistic person or fearful person? The person overly anxious in your surroundings, who is always either complaining or anxious about everything. Because I will tell you, that one person is the best example you can have in your life for how sleight of mouth works. Because that one person who is always complaining or always anxious about everything around it, or like always pessimistic, like, yeah, this will not work, oh, this person is a liar, I don't like this. That person is the best person ever to study sleight of mouth from. Because everything you say, they will reframe it into something negative. When you study how their communication works, you will just figure out how sleight of mouth works. Number 3 is The Secrets of Speed Seduction Workbook by Jeffries. I'm not sure if you can still find that book online for purchase. I know he was still selling it back in the day, maybe not anymore, I don't know. But I would say this was the very first book I found this example of, you see a text or you see a series of sentences and he was breaking them down into, okay, this group of words is the embedded command, this group of words is the whistle phrase, what he was calling a whistle phrase. It has the different terminology in the Milton model, but whatever. He was just breaking down all of those NLP techniques into one sentence, into specific chunks. And that just clarified the whole thing for me so brilliantly, because so far it was maybe like you right now, it was still like, okay, you have 1,000 techniques and whenever you hear somebody speaking, you don't have any clue of what is going where. Is it a consequence pattern from sleight of mouth? Is it a command right here? Where is the tonality change in their voice? It is way too much. But that little workbook from Jeffries was the first, really the first one I ever read about, which was breaking down all of those things one by one. So using very simple sentences and saying, okay, in this sentence, this is where the command is, this is where the adjective is, the Milton model adjective, so you just use adjectives to amplify the command you have been using, for example. It just made my brain so much clearer about what does go where, and when I want to formulate one of those sentences myself, what is the structure. So I would recommend that book if you are maybe not a complete beginner. I would say if you already have some prior exposure to NLP and you are at the phase where you could maybe have a few sessions. If you are a coach, maybe you had a few sessions, maybe you already could use a few of those patterns in your day-to-day conversations, but there is really one big thing missing and you feel like everything you're learning is confusing, overwhelming, it is way too much. If you are at that phase, I would definitely recommend that book because I think it will help you clarify where you are in terms of your language abilities and where to go next. Number 4, not my favorite one, but I will still mention it because I know it has value for beginners of all sorts into NLP. Words That Change Minds by Shelle Charvet. It was about meta programs. That is why I don't really enjoy it that much, because I never thought meta programs were that relevant. I know they are relevant for some people. It was not that relevant in my personal case, but it was breaking down all of the meta programs. So if you are a toward or away from person, if you are somebody who likes to work, who likes to have multiple options in life, or somebody who is more of an introvert and likes to stay into a very small group of people, or like a small sequence of activities during every day, it was basically dissecting all of those personality, let's say, types, and explaining what to say to a person of each group to persuade them. What to say depending on if you want to influence an away from person or a toward person. What is the group of words you can say to influence that one, this one? I think this book is specifically relevant if you are in a work environment. I mean, if you work a real job, not like me, if you work a real job in a company and you have to work with colleagues around, or even worse, if you are a manager yourself and if you have to handle a team of people, then I would definitely say it is relevant because it will help you to figure out, okay, that person who is always defying my authority, why the hell are they defying that, and how could I talk to them so that it eases down the conflicts eventually, and that this person is more compelled about the instructions I give every day, stuff like that. Or whenever you want to figure out your own career choices. This book was actually relevant for me back in 2018, I think, when I had a first job in sales back in the day and it was a disaster. And I had read that book around that time, and I remembered it was really helping. It really helped me to clarify what is my profile in terms of work capacities and what I want to do, and what would be the best career option based on that. So it was more a personal development aspect here from that book than the language abilities. But if you want to study language, I would say it is a good resource if you want to develop that in a work environment specifically. In other contexts of life, maybe not, but in a work environment, yes, definitely a good book to learn from. And the last one, Max Persuasion 2000 by Kenrick Cleveland. I think there were some low problems around Kenrick Cleveland. I think I heard stories about him scamming some clients or whatever. I don't know about the whole fact about this story, but I just know he's much less on the front line of the NLP world as he used to be back in the day. Maybe he's still coaching people out there, I don't know. Just that ebook he launched years ago, probably in the year 2000, therefore was pretty interesting. I wouldn't say it was that much of a great one in terms of sequencing and organizing into a clear sequence from the beginning to the end, the NLP techniques for persuasion, but it was a great one to simplify. Basically, that ebook was giving you a lot of different hints from the Milton model, from representational systems, but only in a very simplified format. So I would say there was about everything you can learn about NLP techniques for persuasion, about language patterns. It is contained inside this ebook, but really in an extremely simplified short format with simple examples. And now, okay, done, we go to the next one. So that was still pretty relevant for me to feel more organized in my head those are the main things, and now whatever I read from another source will somehow be connected to one of the things I read in that one ebook. So a big plus on simplification, because most of the NLP books back then were so loaded with tons and tons of information that no one understands. This one made a great job at just simplifying and giving very few things, just what you need, nothing more. A slight down point on it is simplified, but it is jumping all over the place to this and this and that, and you don't really know what to start from and what is the first thing you would need in your situation, etc. And for example, one thing I really enjoyed from this one that always stayed in my head during the years after this was what he calls the 8 most dangerous words. That I know it was part of the Milton model, but I don't think in the original model it was explained like this. So he says the words but, try, if, might, would, could, should, and can't. So it is 6, 8 with those could and should. Those 8 ones are words you have to be careful about, because if you use them when you want to persuade somebody, that person may trust less what you talk about. That was just one small hint like this, but you see in that ebook there's many of those small hints. Those small things poke like this you can just use randomly, and basically you pick the one that is the most relevant for you, apply it, and then see what else you could use from that book. I found that pretty useful. I think everything about language patterns or NLP has to be about how much can you simplify and not how much can you add, because too many people try to figure out everything theoretically before putting into use, whereas the right strategy is to put into use the very first thing you have in your mind right now about the skills you want to develop with those techniques, and then adapt based on the results you have received, and be willing to go sideways, to go into another unseen territory. Maybe you thought everything would be solved with the Milton model that you are studying for example, and actually no, what you need is better rapport skills, because you thought maybe you were okay, you understand rapport, it is done. Maybe you don't. Maybe actually there is a level of rapport you didn't access yet that would require you to open yourself more to your clients emotionally, which is scary for some therapists because they don't want to put too much of themselves. So there is a line to draw, but how will you learn how to draw that line? By digging into the fire and noticing when you get burned. That's how you learn how far you can go and how far not to go. That's just one side tangent here, one example. Basically, those are the 5 books if you want to see something I wrote myself. There is one book I wrote actually 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It was called the Covert Hypnosis in Real Life, where I summarized whenever you got out of the NLP training, basically how the hell do you apply the techniques and what do you do with all the things you learned as a coach or a therapist. It is down below if you want to check that book that I wrote myself. Thank you. And there is also some other documents like the 7 Steps to Master Sleight of Mouth, which was my attempt at simplifying and just giving you a few hints of how you can use those patterns and apply them in your life. And with that being said, you can check those documents, those books, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.